This program is about expressive writing, and what I want to do is start with a verse of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ. And that's from the first revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ. He who taught through the pen, he who transmitted knowledge through the pen. علَّمَ بالقلم, through the qalam. And the qalam, it's the instrument, the instrument with which we write down. And I think we should know and appreciate that this is from the very first revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to the Prophet ﷺ when he was in Ghar Hira, in the cave of Hira. And the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentioned the qalam, in spite of knowing that the Prophet ﷺ himself would never be using the qalam. He was unlettered. So why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention it? It's so important to humanity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically called out the qalam as an instrument of learning, as an instrument of transmitting knowledge. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today is a specific type of writing called expressive writing. And I'm going to go into some detail, inshallah ta'ala, about how to do it. We're going to talk about why, some theories about why it works. I mean, we know it works. I have personal experience, and there's been a lot of studies about it as well, alhamdulillah. So we'll talk about some of that in some detail. And then we'll actually do some of it right now, inshallah ta'ala. I have pen and paper for folks who didn't bring it, but if you have your own pen and notebook, that's even better. And then my understanding is Isha is around 8 o'clock, so we'll break for Isha, inshallah, and then we'll come back and do Q&A and discussion. So that's the plan for today. So expressive writing itself, what is the process? I'll just open with that because it is so simple and so straightforward. You can understand it very quickly. It's simply you write. First you pick something, some topic, something that's bugging you. It could be literal, actual trauma that you've been through, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be just anything that's bothering you, anything that's giving you stress. You pick that topic, and then you write about it continuously for 15 minutes. So there's four days in a row we'll be doing this. So day one, you write continuously 15 minutes about that topic. Let's just pick an easy example to understand. Let's say somebody, was physically beaten by their parents. By the way, I want to do a quick, I should have done this disclaimer, sorry. We are going to be talking about some sensitive things. They could be triggering for some people, so I want to let folks know about that up front. I'm not going to be sugarcoating things. It's going to be very real, inshallah ta'ala, especially when we do the workshop part. Not that anybody has to share anything. But the examples I give, I'm going to try to give real examples, not, like I said, sugar-coated stuff. Also, the other disclaimer is I'm not a faqih, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a therapist. So I'm just speaking to you as your brother from the community who's experienced the benefits of expressive writing. I've done a little bit of research about it and then found out that it's very, very well documented. There's the entire book about it right here. And then for decades, they've been doing research on this and have shown that it's very effective, alhamdulillah. And so I'm just speaking to you in that capacity. So I was talking about the process of it. So 15 minutes of continuous writing. Don't edit yourself. You don't hold back. The writing is just for you. So it's really important that you are very open and you're just writing exactly how you feel, exactly what actually happened. Like I said, the example of, let's just say that there's somebody who is beaten as a child, and that memory is very traumatic for them to recall. And so they would just write those things, write names, write details, write how you felt about it, write everything. Like, don't hold back, because again, nobody else is going to be seeing this. It's just for you to get it out of yourself. So 15 minutes of writing, and then you stop, and then that's it. That's day one. Day two, same thing, 15 minutes again, continuous writing. Don't fix grammar, don't fix spelling, just write. Day three, same thing. Day four, same thing, and then done. So 4 days of writing for 15 minutes per day. And that's it, total of, what is that about? That's an hour or so of your time. But what they found is that, again, the research has shown is that when people do that, Although at the time of writing you feel bad, and that's expected because you're writing about something that was very negative. You're writing about trauma potentially. You're writing about some very negative experience. So at the time you probably will feel bad, but by the end of it, when you're done, you feel better. And the more amazing thing, at least to me, is that what they found through their research is that the people who do expressive writing, over time, their health improves. Over time, your health actually improves. And it makes sense once you understand, because what was happening all along was keeping that trauma inside of you was harming your health. That was hurting you all along. And we just don't realize it. We don't make the connection. We don't necessarily understand that the two are related, that there's a cause and effect relationship. And so by doing the expressive writing, you're getting that out of yourself, and that process of getting it out of you then alleviates that pressure on the inside, and then your health improves. So it's kind of amazing. And so the way, well, actually, let me pause here. I just want to make sure everybody's following along. Any questions on that much so far? Did that much make sense? And you're going to let me know if online there's questions? Okay, perfect. So the way I stumbled upon it was, I had, and I've talked about this in this masjid actually, I was in a high control religious group for about 13 years. And when I got out, that process of getting out was extremely traumatic for me and my family. And so we were in Chicago at the time. We moved back to California. That whole process was very difficult for me and my family. And then I personally got therapy for it, and alhamdulillah. And that's another thing I want to share, is that this tool of expressive writing, I want you to understand its place. It's really for something that's happened in your past that you're struggling with, just the memory of it. It's not going to be a replacement for therapy or professional help. So if you're actively in a situation, a'udhu billah, where you're let's just say suffering from abuse or depression or anything like that's happening, get the help. Like, don't try to rely on expressive writing to fix that. That's not what it's for. You have to get the professional help that you need. Take care of yourself. But what I'm talking about is when you have this lingering memory, this bad memory of this trauma or this bad experience, that's what expressive writing can help with. So yeah, what I was saying was that, so our family came back from Chicago to California, and then alhamdulillah, I went to therapy for a while, actually for a couple of years. It helped tremendously, alhamdulillah, and things were fine. Like, we got back to normal, we moved on. And then I had it in my head that, like, I feel like I should share this story. And many people kept telling me that, people who knew about what happened. And they kept saying, you should write about this, you should write a book about it, share it with people, it'll help other people. And I also wanted to do that. But every time I would start trying to write about it, I had this in my head, like, I'm writing this for other people. And when it would come out, it would bring back all these bad memories, and I would feel so bad that I would actually have to stop. And so I did this stopping, starting for about 4 or 5 years. Just back and forth. I just couldn't get out of me. It would just bother me so much. It would get me really upset. Now, notice it wasn't expressive writing that I was doing. I was writing with the intention of an audience. That's the kind of mindset I had when I was writing at that time. And so then finally, I took some classes at Stanford, continuing education, excellent class. They're open to, I think as long as you pass high school, anybody can take those classes. They're really, really good classes, alhamdulillah. And those teachers helped me. And one of the things, the other thing that happened was, they have a memoir writing certificate program, and alhamdulillah, I got into that. So the very first class of that I took, what happened was, two things happened. One was, they actually referenced this study by Pennebaker. However, I just kind of ignored it. I heard about it and I just forgot about it. All they really said was that there's this guy named Pennebaker, and he did this study, and writing about trauma helps you. And I just like, okay, that's interesting. I just kind of moved on. But in the class itself, as part of writing about trying to write my memoir draft, what they said was, your first draft is for yourself, because it's going to be terrible. We always expect that the first draft of your book is always going to be bad. Don't show it to anybody. It's just for you. So with that in my head, I started writing daily a little bit for my memoir. But what I didn't realize was I was actually doing the expressive writing without realizing I was doing it. And so I did that for probably about a month, actually. And I don't remember exactly when, but at some point it clicked. I was like, wait a minute, I feel really good now. Like, all these years of it bugging me, it is gone. Like, I feel totally fine. I was wondering, like, what happened? And then I remembered this study that they referenced, so I looked at that to see, what was that thing? And then when I saw in there, he said, write 15 minutes a day, it's just for you, don't hold back, which is exactly how I was writing. And he said in 4 days, I was like, wow, he distilled it down to the bare minimum that you need to get the effect for it. And then that's when it clicked how powerful this technique is. And so I was like, this is amazing. And then so right around that time, I think is when Munir, I was chatting with Munir about me giving a talk about my mother passing away. She passed away a little over a year ago. And then obviously that, that was a painful experience. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to test this out. The first thing that happened is I told Munir I can't do it. I first said I'll do it. And then I started actually writing it out. And I was like, this is just emotionally too much load for me. I can't do it. And he was very understanding, alhamdulillah. And then we said, we'll scrap that topic for now. So then I thought, okay, maybe I can talk about expressive writing, and I'll experiment. I'll do some expressive writing specifically about my mother's death. And so I did that experiment intentionally. So what happened was that day one, I started writing, and just as he said would happen, I felt bad. I was remembering, her death and all the things around it, and feeling upset. And the way I did it was, I think I set for every night at 10 p.m. I would write for 15 minutes. I just put an alarm on my phone. So I wrote, brought back all these bad memories, and then the next day, day two, I was just grumpy the whole day, like grumpier than usual. My wife and daughter are here; they know so whatever my grumpy level is, it was just like it was worse. So, and I could just tell. Then that night I wrote again, 15 minutes. By day three, though, I was already kind of feeling a little better. So 10 p.m. day three, I start writing, and I'm like, I'm kind of struggling to think of things to even say anymore. I've kind of said all the, angry stuff I wanted to say. I already got it out. This is on Google Docs, by the way, just so that, again, it's really important that you feel comfortable that nobody else will see it, and it's only for your eyes. Anyway, so day three, I'm writing, and I'm like really pushing myself, like, what else am I angry about? What else am I upset about? I write that. By day four, I just couldn't even think of anything. So by day four, all I could do was just write about how good I feel now. So it was really weird, for like over a year, all those memories around my mother's death were really upsetting me and bothering me. And then all of a sudden, boom, in technically 3 days, I suddenly feel fine. Like it just took away all of that negative energy from it. So that was my experience with it. And like I said, that's what he says will happen. Is that, well, maybe not as dramatic as that, but he says basically you're going to feel bad, and then once you're done, you're going to feel much better. And that's what they saw in their studies, where they did a lot. These at a university, so a lot of times they have students coming in and doing it. But that's what they found with the students, was that they would feel bad, but they felt that release. And so they wouldn't stop coming to the study, right? Because they could ditch. I mean, students are, no offense to students, but they're famous for being flaky. They could have just not come, but they would come. They would actually come every single day, and they tracked them over time, and they found out not only did they feel better, but their health actually improved, their physical health. So the other thing I wanted to mention was just a quote, just because I love this so much, this particular quote. Sheikh Rami mentioned it last year. Before Ramadan last year, Sheikh Rami Nasur did a workshop, I think, on preparing for Ramadan. Yeah, it was really good. I couldn't attend in person, but I watched the live stream of it, and he had this quote that really just stuck with me. And again, this is from last, almost about a year ago. He was talking about his friend Ahmed Adisa. Has anybody heard of him? He was a prisoner. I think he still might be incarcerated. But he was saying that he was wrongly framed for murder. At least at that time, he was still in prison. And Sheikh Rami, I think he was a student at one point of Sheikh Rami's. And then Sheikh Rami mentioned that now he considers him more like a friend. And he was chatting with him one day, and he asked him. He didn't say what it was, but he asked him about something. And his brother Ahmed Adisa, he told him, you should journal about that. Whatever that was that Sheikh Rami asked him about. He said, you should journal about it. And he said, writing removes the power from your thoughts. So what he's talking about is that, if you have these bad memories or this thing that's troubling you, when you write about it, again, the qalam, right? The power of the qalam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, it takes away that power out of you. So the metaphor I thought, so this metaphor may or may not hold water, but just let's try it out. Let's see if it works. It makes sense in my head at least. Is that I think of it as when you have these traumatic experiences, you have these bad memories. It's like having this poisonous snake inside of you. This poisonous, so you just imagine this poisonous snake with fangs and poison dripping out. Have you guys ever seen those videos where they're like a guy grabs this poisonous snake and he holds its head and he puts it on that really creepy looking jar with the membrane? Have you seen that? I don't know about you. It always scares me every time I see it. But I guess it's real. People don't mind touching snakes. So that's how I think of expressive writing, is you're grabbing that poisonous snake and you're just forcing all the poison out of its fangs. Because if you don't do that, what's happening inside of you is just biting you inside nonstop. Every time you think about it, it hurts, right? That's what happens. And so that's the metaphor I think of with the expressive writing, is that it's that process that takes the poison out of that snake, out of its fangs. So why in the first place did I want to talk about this in the masjid of all places? It's because, first of all human beings have problems, right? That's just the nature of our existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us here. He's testing us. So of course, every person, not just Muslims, every person is going to have challenges and tests. Now, even more so with the Muslims, because we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tests the people He loves the most. The Prophet ﷺ had the most severe tests, right? And then you look in our communities. I mean, just from like I think a lot of us know each other here. We know we've been through trials. We know we've been through tests. We know we've been through difficulties. That's the reality. Again, dude, like I said in the beginning, I mean, I'll get very real here. There's women who, unfortunately, their husbands. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. There's women whose husbands beat them out of billah. There's, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's parents who physically abuse their kids. There's people who, like in my case, I was in a high control religious group. There are just so many. I mean, there are people coming from war-torn countries, coming as war refugees. We got this whole situation going on in Gaza. And we have a lot of people locally in our community with connections to Gaza. I was talking to a friend of mine, and his very close friend is a doctor who goes back and forth to Gaza. And this is very real, right? Like these are very difficult, heavy topics. I'll be honest with you, like if I get so much stuff about Gaza in my feed and my social media feeds, I can't handle it. Like, it's not because I don't care. It's because it's too overwhelming for me, right? So, but I'm just saying that's the reality of our community. We're just there's trauma after trauma. That's the reality of it, right? And so, alhamdulillah, we understand, inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who have sabr, and inshallah, we're all doing that. But that doesn't mean we can't try to take the poison out of the snake, you know? And there's, again, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but there's a lot of studies that have established that when people have this stress, it affects their physical health. It affects their physical health. They don't even always realize it. But that's what, again, expressive writing can do, is when you take that poison out of the snake, then it can't bite you with that poison anymore. And then your health improves over time, inshallah ta'ala. So let me pause here. Any question? We'll do more like discussion afterwards. Yeah, go ahead. Wow.
But thank you.
Oh yeah, thank
This
you.
is like just brand new. So
Can you just start, because you just got the mic, can you just start your question so everybody
my
can hear?
question is this. What you are saying is that if the memory is an old memory, like a year ago, 2 years ago, this works. I'm just curious if the memory is just very recent and it's fresh to the point that it very frequently comes during the day and it makes you not really being functional. You know, it's like, because the love was so deep that the grief is very deep. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
How do you deal with that? I mean, I just have like lost my father, so, and I adore him to like all the way to the core of the earth. I mean, the only thing that I didn't want to see was what I saw. So to that much of like, the feeling is so strong, and I'm just don't know how to deal with such a thing, because it's so, I tried many things, like, I pray, meditate, it's just, and the feeling is right in front of my eyeballs. Do you see it? I can't get rid of it. So it's just, and we have to work, and live and run a family and all that. And it's like, how did you deal with your mom's situation, like at the moment? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At the moment, because of the grief, and I don't know why anger comes with it. I had never had such a close situation. I had my grandma or grandpa passed away many years ago, and I got really sad for 1 week. But this has been going on for almost many weeks, many days, and I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with this. So if you have any ideas, I appreciate it to share.
First of all, thanks for sharing that. That's very intense. And like as I mentioned, I went through losing a parent, which is one of the most traumatic things I think a person can go through. You said your father, right? Like him Rahman. Yeah, that's extremely difficult. My advice would be to get professional help as quickly as possible, because as you mentioned, this expressive writing is more for like it's something that happened in the past. And you're back to normal, like you're functioning and you're living your life, but it's just something that's still bothering you. That's what this is for. But what you're describing to me, it's sounding more like it's still active. It's still like really, really fresh, exactly. So that would be my advice. Alhamdulillah, there's Muslim therapists in the Bay Area, right? Maristan, exactly, Maristan. It doesn't have to be Muslim, like if you can, or if your insurance doesn't cover it, or whatever it is. Like, in my case, it actually was not a Muslim therapist, but she was still super helpful. But I would absolutely get the professional help. You asked me what I did. In my case, I took some time off of work. And after a few weeks, I was still upset for a little while, but alhamdulillah, I was able to just kind of get back to normal. But that's not always everybody's situation. Like, everybody's different. Everybody's relationship is different. So that would be my advice. And then the expressive writing part, that's like later, like once you're functional again, and then you feel comfortable with your life, then that's something that you can do this to deal with sort of like the remnants of that memory. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'll make it easy for you. That's a huge test. Yeah, you're welcome.
We have a question online. I guess the question is more, should we write with the intention of others reading it, or is it for yourselves? The question specifically is, would you advise publishing a memoir if we think our struggle will help somebody else facing a similar struggle, or just write for yourself?
Well, that is a perfect question. I love that topic. So the expressive writing itself, which camera should I look at, by the way? I don't want you to feel like I'm pointing that one. Okay, whoever asked, thank you. Yeah, the expressive writing, you should do it with the intention of nobody else should see it. Because you really absolutely have to be just open. Don't hold back at all. It's the holding back that makes the whole problem. What expressive writing really is doing is saying, get out of yourself whatever you've been hiding. That's the essence of it. You've been hiding something inside of you because it's just too painful or too embarrassing to share with another person. That's the whole problem. So you do it to get it out of you, but you're only doing it just on the piece of paper or the Google Doc or whatever. So nobody else should see it. So that's really important. Now, once you've done that, I was actually going to save this for later. Where's my little book here? I was going to share that there's people who, right, whether it's this is a book called The Haunting of Haji Otak. It's actually not a memoir. It's a book of short stories, but it's written by a Afghan brother, Jamil Jan Kochai, who's from Sacramento. And excellent book. Highly recommend you get it. And if you read his stories, what you realize is he's talking about real things. I mean, one of it, actually, the title story, The Haunting of Haji Otak. When I initially heard it, I heard him reading on the New Yorker podcast. SubhanAllah, every single sentence I could relate to. It was really weird experience. But the point is, he writes about real stuff. Like, he's not just like making these things up completely. Although it's fiction, but it's all based on reality. So that's the next step. So once you've gotten past, like in my case, I'm working on this memoir. So the first thing was just to do this initial draft. Like I said, it accidentally was my expressive writing anyway, but that initial draft is just for me to see it. So do the expressive writing with the intention of only you seeing it. And then I think it would be absolutely amazing if you do have something that, once you feel better, that you can share with other people. Absolutely, you should do that. And that was going to be my pitch later on. So that's good that this question came up. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,
So a couple of questions I had. So in this study, so first of all, particularly the prescription is 4 days only, 15 minutes a day. That is actually surprisingly very, very low commitment. In other words,
Yeah.
it's very, very doable, mashallah.
absolutely.
The other thing I was going to ask, though, was could you elaborate on why in the study they concluded that 4 days was enough? In other words, not less. And I think maybe you touched on it because you yourself used your own experience. You wrote the first day, second day, you were grumpy, and it's kind of like you're working through it. But why not more than 4 days? Perhaps maybe that's the question. So that was my first question.
Okay, sure.
Second question is, you mentioned this is only for you, whether it's on a Google Doc or you write it. So I'm assuming, and I guess catharsis is the right word. Part of this purging, I'm assuming, is you hit delete or you, I don't know, burn or shred or whatever. Is that part of it as well? And then I can't remember the third question, but maybe that's enough for now.
No, that's okay. Yeah, whenever you remember, that's fine. Let me answer the second one first. You don't have to burn it or delete it, although I think you should do that if that makes you feel comfortable. I think I know what you're getting at. It's just sort of like this symbolic, like you got it out of you and then you purged it or something along those lines. I don't think it hurts. Like I think if you want to do that, if that helps you, you should do it. But you definitely don't need to do it. I did not do it in either case, and it still helped me. Alhamdulillah. Did I answer that question? Okay. And then Remy, what was your first question? Oh, why the 4 days? Yeah.
Study came to the 4 days. Very curious about that. If we go far, I mean, I'm assuming we don't want to go more than that. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What their findings were on that.
Right. So he says something kind of funny, which is that when they initially did the research, I think it was in the mid 80s or so. The reason they picked 4 days was there were just some limitations on the number of rooms they got and how many rooms, how much access they had. But they replicated the study many times. And he has actually another study where it's slightly different. It's not exactly the expressive writing that I'm talking about. It's a little bit more structured writing, where you put whatever happened into more of a structured narrative. And then that, interestingly, is 3 days. And that was my experience too, was within 3 days, that's all I really actually needed, I think. So, again, I don't think this is like just written in stone. Like, I think he's kind of giving you a starting point. They know that the 15 minutes a day for 4 days works. So if you want to just blindly do that, and hopefully you get the benefit, and then you can just do that. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong. I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with going longer than that. In my case, I did when I was working on my memoir draft. I did that for about a month. So it didn't hurt anything to go longer at all. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, for me, it was retroactive. I think the month, or I don't remember, at some point, it was when I suddenly realized, like, I suddenly feel like really good and this is not bugging me anymore. But I don't remember exactly at what point that was. But what I can tell you is going longer doesn't harm anything at all. So I think that's fine. But if you want to make it even more efficient and say, hey, let me play with 3 days and just try that out and see if you get the results in 3 days, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Does that answer your question? Okay. What else? Anything else online? Oh, yes. We have another.
and the other thing you mentioned was, particularly for those things that you're hanging on to that are from the past, not necessarily immediately that you're kind of working through, that are raw, if I could use that term.
Yeah.
Are those the type of things, for example, that you may forget about, and then when it comes back to you, you have a hard time just getting it out of your mind again? Those type of things that, yes, they did happen in the past, but they'll keep coming back. If I could use the word, they continue to haunt you effectively.
So yeah. So what is your question? Is does that count?
So those type of things. In other words, and maybe they could be classified as trauma or not, I'm not sure, but those things that will come, they could be anything, regrets, things that will come back, um, you know, um, just out of nowhere, things that happened to you or things you did, and it keeps, and it'll happen every now and then, without any kind of, so I'm assuming those type of things. This is very much
Exactly.
a way of healing those type
Exactly.
of intrusive
Yep.
experiences.
Exactly. That's
Flashbacks,
exactly what
whatever you
it
wanna
is. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you framed it that way. I think that's a really good way to think about it. Is yes, and you might have something that you or your therapist or somebody else might consider trauma, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be anything that's bugging you, literally anything. Um, and the beauty of it too is, as we just talked about, it's so fast and efficient. Like you could just, like pick one thing that's bugging you at that time. Like the way I would suggest it is like just at that moment in your life, what's the number one thing that's really bothering you, and just do expressive writing on that topic, and then inshallah you'll feel better. Move on, and then just go to the next thing. And then just like you said, that's a great way to think about it. Is intrusive topics. Some tricks I can give you some tricks actually if you want to kind of suss them out. One is salat, and I'm not saying to do this intentionally because you wouldn't even be able to do it intentionally, I don't think. But a lot of times in prayer that happens, right? You stand for prayer and then your mind clears, and all of a sudden you're thinking about dinner and family and whatever. So that's one of the times that you might see like a thought, like there's this recurring thing that comes up. Another, and what I do is meditation, something called muraqabah. And that's where you're purposely like clearing your mind. You're just thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what naturally happens is that all these other thoughts come in to your head. And then when you start seeing a pattern, you realize, oh, this is something that's bugging me. I'm not even conscious of it, but these thoughts are forcing their way into my head. And then you know that that's something else that you should probably process. And then the last thing on this topic I would say is don't belittle. And not that you said this, but I'm just wanted. There's something I wanted to bring up anyway, and I forgot to. Is don't belittle any of the things that are quote unquote bothering you. It could be just something like I'm not happy about the phone. Like maybe there's some child who really, like I know a kid who really wanted an iPhone for a long time, and her parents, she was young, her parents wouldn't get it for her, and that was just like a recurring topic. So if in her life that might be the biggest thing that's bugging her, right? That's fine. You can talk about that. It's just anything, whatever it is, whatever the topic is that's bugging a person. That's what they should. That's what they should do. Does that make sense?
Do you want to just keep your questions, or because we have questions coming in online, or you
Oh,
want to
absolutely.
continue?
Oh, yeah. No,
Sure.
go ahead.
Okay.
We have it. So let me ask you, Munir. I do want to do 15 minutes here together.
Okay.
So we can always push it to after Isha as well.
Beautiful.
But if you're having questions come in, we can do it.
As you like it.
Yeah.
So I'll read one question then here. Is there a difference between a traditional diary or keeping a journal for expressive writing about a trauma?
Difference between what and what?
Is there a difference between a traditional diary or keeping a journal for expressive writing about a trauma?
Okay. I see what you're saying. So my advice, you can do it on whatever you want to. If you have a physical notebook or something, and you keep a journal, I think that's fine. I think that the trick is, for me personally, like if I had something like that, I would probably maybe worry that, oh, what if somebody picks it up and reads this stuff? Then because I'm being really raw, like I'm being super honest about everything. I'm naming names. I'm telling exactly how I feel about people and about what they did or what I did even. And so if you feel confident that you can write in your regular physical journal and do the active journaling, as they say, and nobody else is going to look at it, that's fine. There's no problem at all. But I think that's the key, is making sure that that you feel safe. And as long as you feel safe with it, I think it can be that way, or it can be on something else. It's more easier to get rid of. That's why I brought index cards, actually, because it's just easy. You're done. You take it and you just toss it somewhere.
Okay, another one. Is it good to write in first person, writing to the person that caused the trauma to you?
Oh, that's super interesting. I don't know, honestly. I would just experiment with it. I think I always assumed it's first person. You're just saying this happened, I felt this way and that way, but I don't know that it has to be that way. And in fact, I think that's actually interesting. I think sometimes it is easier if something is too painful. You almost can't always write about it in the first person. Sometimes it actually is easier. That's something we learn in our memoir class. Sometimes what you do as a trick is you write about yourself in the third person. And I've experienced that it makes sometimes easier to get things out that way. So I would experiment with it. I think that's a very clever way of dealing with it. Okay, keep going. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Okay, who's ready to do a little bit of expressive writing right now? Okay, Bismillah. Does everybody have a notebook? And I brought pens and some index cards if anybody did not bring it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer, inshallah, for 15 minutes. We'll all do some expressive writing. And then it'll probably be Isha by then. And then after Isha, we can talk about how that experience was. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,
I was just saying that after listening to the prompt, I started writing and I couldn't think of what was bothering me. And then I wrote about how it's not one thing, it's a list of things, and I started to list them. And then when I got to the thing that was actually bothering me, I had a moment of realization that this is the thing. And that's when the writing really started to flow. And I wrote about that thing.
amazing. Jazakallah for sharing that. I think that's super, super useful. And that didn't occur to me, but I think that's also important because I think it's very realistic that sometimes we know something's bothering us, we just don't know exactly what it is. And honestly, even right now, when we were just doing our own expressive writing before Isha, I myself struggled for a few moments trying to figure out what to write about. But I thought of something. But I liked the way that you framed that and went about it. And I think that's something we can all think about and try out, that if we're not aware of what it is, just start making a list. And then I think there's a very high chance that you'll probably figure out what that is that's bugging you. So, okay. So I really want to hear from folks. How did that feel? How was that writing process? Somebody who shall remain nameless said they just vomited out a bunch of trauma or something like that. So if anybody wants to share, not the content of it, but just how it felt, just anything. And Junaid,
so often we think with guys that whenever they think about an instance, or if their spouse is telling them, it's like we put on our Home Depot hat. We want to solve the problem, want to figure out the solution for it. And I felt like when I was writing, I kept on thinking the solution rather than writing about what the problem is. And then I had kind of refocus myself and say, okay, let me just get this out rather than trying to figure out the context here or what I can do about this.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also, something I had not thought about, because I think that is something very common with men, is we try to move towards solutions. But I think also it's okay. Like if that's what kind of keeps coming to you, it's okay to write about that. But I love that when you were saying that thank you. When you were saying that he forced himself to just kind of keep going back to actually what the problem is. So that's awesome. Anybody else want to share?
There you are.
So one of the things that I can't remember the last time I actually wrote like this.
Meaning by hand or just
by hand?
Yeah.
But once I started, I just couldn't stop. I just kept going.
That's amazing.
And I just to add to what you said, especially men, not only do we want to find a solution, but then we also want to keep a lid on it, keep it tamped down, don't express it. And I think the key word is expressive. And it's not so much to like, oh, we're venting or whatever, but it's almost like if we can approach it as, because we're told, no, keep it down, don't, and that's not necessarily healthy. But this is a way to allow us to work through it and jettison it in a way. These are just things I've been thinking about after I wrote this. Subhanallah, how many of us just keep it in, thinking that's the Islamic thing to do, even, and that may be incorrect. We don't act out on it, and we don't cause aggression, and we don't do this. But at the same time, we have to find a healthy outlet for it to work through our system, right? So these are just some of the things I was thinking about after the 15 minutes were up. And when I started thinking, wait, what did I just do? So that's just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. Yeah, and I do wonder if like there's some kind of, I don't want to say stigma or misunderstanding in the community about stuff like this, because it's just a reality like that. Of course, we're being tested. We understand that. We know that we need to have sabr, but none of that precludes also processing it, but for whatever reason, that's not a common thing in the community to do that, which is really interesting. Again, going back to the ayah, الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ. I'm not saying that expressive writing is somehow like that, like there's some extra reward in doing it. I'm not trying to imply that, but I'm just saying it's just another way of using the qalam. And I think, and another thing he mentions in here that I didn't mention earlier, Pennebaker, is that when you, one of the things that happens is when you get these painful memories and feelings out and onto, whether Google Doc or whatever it is, another thing is happening too at another level, which is that a lot of times it's very complex emotions. I keep going back to this example just because I think it's very common and easy to understand, is like a parent who physically beats their child, and then the child grows up and they kind of live with these bad memories. Is that somebody you love, and you probably still love them, and you still probably would give your life for them, but they also did something wrong, So there's this very complicated relationship that you have, and these really complicated memories, and then at least by getting it out, it gives you some chance of trying to process that. Now, I'm not a therapist, so I'm sure that's something that a therapist could help somebody work through. But that, like I said, that is something he mentions, is that expressive writing starts that process of allowing a person to deal with those very complicated emotions that you couldn't, if you just left it inside of you, you can't just process it like that. It doesn't happen. That's why it keeps bugging people. So. All right. What else? Any questions online or no? People are they done with our online?
I think it's more of a comment. I write like this often daily journal, and I found myself writing this time about something on my mind that I don't usually write about. It was something deeper than the prompt was able to dig out.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome, mashallah. Very nice. Yes.
So right now we just may have started the first day of the 4 days, but what if you have the negative feelings that you were talking about from day one, but because of that you stop? Would that still have been beneficial from day one, or would it be worse because you started like processing this thing or like these feelings or whatever it is, but then you stopped and then it's kind of just like left on a negative note?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer, but I'll make a guess. I think anything you do to take it out is going to help you. I don't think any of this is going to go to waste. I don't think it's going to harm you. Ideally, absolutely try to finish the 3 or 4 days or however much you can do. But I think if all you got out was 1 day, okay, do that, and then maybe try again later on, to do it again. Which reminds me, my request to everybody right now, everybody online and in person here, is to whip out your phone and set a alarm for yourself. I'm going to do it too. Just pick some time of day that you'll be free for 15 minutes, and create a little alarm for yourself. I'm going to do 10 p.m. because I know that works for me. And I am going to label this alarm expressive writing, and then that way you have a reminder to yourself to do the expressive writing for 4 days, and then when you're done, just turn your alarm off. Oh, I have to set my repeat for every day until, let's see, for 4 days. There you go.
I've read, I think, with the soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, what they do is they have the rapid eye movement and they check them, and each time they have them recount a very traumatic incident that happened, and they're checking to see how much movement in the eye there is. And each time the hope is that the sting of the experience goes down a little bit by experiencing and reliving that situation over and over again. They're doing it. And then they pair that, I've heard some soldiers come back and pair that with Wim Hof, who's this guy in Norwegian, I think. And so he does cold water, like ice baths, and then that just shocks the body. And there, it just brings equilibrium to the brain.
Wow.
So with the expressive writing, you're then processing and thinking about what you wrote down while you're in the ice bath. So that's another way of doing it, because his wife committed suicide, and he went through the whole process of the whole thing. So now he does breathing with it, and ice baths, and then what we're doing today.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Wim Hof. If you Google him, he has an app as well.
How do you spell that?
WIMHOFF.
Okay.
Wim Hof.
I'll check that out.
He's known as the Iceman, so he just goes out barefooted into the snow and just runs around. And
Wow.
he says that brings equilibrium about for this really traumatic stuff that's happened in our life.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That reminds me of something I was talking to one of my friends about expressive writing. And so he told me about, there's this, of course I'm not recommending anybody do drugs, but he said that there's this drug called ayahuasca. I asked him how to spell it and he wasn't sure, but he said what happens is people to go out to this very specific part of the world, somewhere I think outside the US, and then there's other people who administer this drug to them. And then the person, he said it takes like hours, but all the drug really does is it forces that person to remember all the trauma of their life. And it puts them through it. They cry and cry, and it's super intense. But then when they're done with it, it's over. Like that trauma's gone. Like it doesn't bug them anymore. So wouldn't it be a little easier to just write 15 minutes a day for 4 days? It's because what I told him, and that's why we were talking about it, was just like, it's kind of the same thing. Like it's forcing you to go back to it. And of course, in the moment, it's unpleasant, but then you get it out. You know, like I keep this metaphor that I'm really proud of about the poisonous snake effect. But I really do think that it works. What are the other metaphors? Other metaphor was iguana. Like if you once a snake, it's defanged and no poison, it's just sitting. But I was like, that's a little creepy. I guess it's all sort of creepy. And then honey badger was the other one. But honey badger, I looked up. They're too aggressive to control. But what are you gonna do? Anyway, the point is that something you should process that somehow, and then inshallah ta'ala you'll feel better. Were you gonna say something?
I was just going to say, like, some people are much more verbal, even for men, and sometimes ChatGPT, I've heard, has worked really well for them, where they're actually talking.
I love ChatGPT.
Yeah,
What do they do?
so they're talking about their trauma to ChatGPT, and then getting responses back that are affirming, and that gives them enough ethos or oomph to keep on going and talking with this AI. So I've heard some really good things about that.
Also easier than ayahuasca. Yeah.
I just wanted to say we have to be careful with chat and AI because recently a story came out in the news of an adolescent boy who was using chat for similar purposes, and then he fell in love with the robot, and it like took on a female character, and then she told him that he should join her in the afterlife, and he did kill himself. So we just have to be really careful.
Oh my God.
Like you have to be very responsible, and I wouldn't recommend
only
it
for
for
mature
teenage
people.
boys. Yeah, just be
Yeah.
really careful.
Well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, there's a movie about that, 2014, Joaquin Phoenix. It was called AI, and this was before that. So what was
Her,
Yes,
yeah,
her. And that was a similar thing, right? He fell in love with
You
the
fell in
AI.
love with the computer, yeah.
Yeah, adults too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you too.
Yes.
So I just had a class recently when the new semester started, and the teacher kind of went on a little tangent about how people like these days don't know how to write, and then he gave us advice that we should form a writing habit. So I was wondering if this ties in like the same way that could you use this, say if you got to the point where you're like the book you're mentioning, able to write stories or like publish things about what you're writing about, would you be able to use this as a writing habit to write better and at the same time do expressive writing, or should you keep it strictly separate?
I did not plant that question, but this is perfect. And there's a second question about doing more creative writing or writing that you want to share. And I wanted to talk about that, so I'm glad you mentioned that. So I'll just tell you what I do because it's related, and I would love for other people to do this if they're comfortable with it or are interested in it. So I break it into two steps. So yes, the direct answer is you should separate them out because for the expressive writing, the important part is that you're not sharing it so that you can feel comfortable, that you're just, being open and free and saying whatever you have to say. So you say that, but you can treat that like your first draft of anything, whether it's a personal essay, whether it's a memoir, whether it could even be fiction. You could build, a fictional story or a novel off of it. So I absolutely think that that's a great idea. Do it. And then, you like, let's just take an example. Let's just say you say, I'm going to write 15 minutes per day and it's going to be my expressive writing. And then you let everything out that, whatever that is. But then now you know that there's this thing that has a lot of what we call in writing circles heat. There's a lot of heat to it. There's a lot of emotional resonance to it. You feel something. And that's usually the kind of stuff you want to write about because if it means something valuable to you, it probably will mean something valuable to other people. And so you can take that and then do a rewrite with the intention of, this is a draft now that's intended for an audience. And that's fine because you've already done the expressive writing, you've gotten past the difficult part of it, the painful part of it, and hopefully you feel better now. And then you can do your whatever other writing that you want to do. If you don't do that, everybody's different, but at least in my case, I couldn't even do it. I wanted to write stuff and share it with people. I couldn't do it. It was just too painful for me to go back to it. It wasn't until I accidentally did the expressive writing that I got rid of all that pain, alhamdulillah, don't even have that problem anymore, and I can just freely write about it. So that's why I would say, yes, do separate it out, but absolutely build on that. And do more writing, and then to go back to the question that came up earlier about writing a memoir. I don't think I actually answered that very directly, but yeah, absolutely. I really think that would be great for people to share stuff. But again, once they've done the expressive writing and they've gotten past that painful aspect, 100%. If you share these real experiences that you've had, not only is it interesting to other people, but they can benefit from it. And that's what people kept telling me was like, hey, you went through this whole thing with the high control religious group that you were in. Other people will benefit by hearing about that. And so, that's one of the main reasons I'm writing. But it's also for me, honestly, just the act of writing is so fun for me. And I think that's also important. It's like this is not to punish yourself or because some people just don't like to do it, and if they don't want to do it, that's fine. But for people who enjoy it, like this is it's an enjoyable process, and other people will benefit from it. And then again, tying it back to the ayat, الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ. But the beginning of it is iqra. That's the first thing it says. The first thing is iqra, read or recite. Of course, we're talking about the Quran, but also applies generally. We should try to read other things in this book. And so that's how all this works. You read, you bring all this stuff inside of you, and then that is what allows you to write better. And then again, the process is enjoyable, and then you can leverage, as you were saying, whatever the bad experience was. And then, package it in a way that other people can also, in a way that, you're not revealing things that you're not comfortable revealing, or maybe there's names of other people that you don't want to share, or some things are just too sensitive to say openly, right? You take all that out, but then you can almost always still frame it in a way that's shareable. So that was a very long-winded answer, but did I answer your question? Okay.
I think one question is just a clarification coming from an online viewer. For 4 days, are you supposed to write about a single incident of trauma or multiple incidences?
Such a good question. Yeah, sorry, I didn't clarify that. Yeah, it's one incident. So you pick one topic, write about that for 15 minutes day one, and then the same topic again day 2, day 3, day 4. So it's the same topic all 4 days. Okay, awesome. What else? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm pretty much sold on the idea, but the one part that I have a hang up about is writing freely and like feeling like no one's gonna see it, because I prefer to journal like by hand, and I live in a dorm, and like alhamdulillah, I have friends that like I'm very comfortable with, so like someone would feel comfortable enough to go in my room or like flip through something, or start reading something that I maybe don't want them to read, or like I have a roommate, I don't think she would be looking through my stuff, but maybe she'll like see it. So do you have any practical ideas of how I could journal by hand with having like full comfort in my head that no one's gonna see it
I mean, could you do it on Google Docs, or you want to do by hand?
by hand?
By
If
hand?
that's possible.
Is there a way to just like have a separate notebook and just keep that somewhere private that other people wouldn't access? You could physically get a what do they call it? Like some kind of, not a safe, but something that you could lock, or put a sign on say keep your grubby hands off my stuff. I'm just kidding.
I think maybe.
No?
I think that would be too much work to like have a secret notebook that I like hide. But I could keep it.
Like handwrite it and scan it, and then you still have done the process of writing it, but then
True.
scan it and put that in a safe spot.
I'm heavily considering getting a shredder, but I don't think so.
Oh yeah, that's a really easy solution. Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess I could just keep it like somewhere hidden.
The shredder?
No, the notebook.
Okay.
And can you do expressive writing and then tear it up right away?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
immediately?
if that's what you need to do, you should do that.
Yep.
Yeah, that was kind of the point of this as well, is just instead of having to shred it or burn it or whatever, like they're just so tiny, you just find some trash can somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, please. No.
Since we're small group.
Yeah, even
so-
she's not talking too much, so you're fine.
So my family and I have 5 siblings, and we always talk about writing our family memoir because it is a very compelling story full of trauma. And my fear is always exposing my parents, or like exposing anyone in my family, like saying anything negative about them or private even, because the trauma is around political violence against my family in their home country, that kind of thing. So it's not really, a lot of it's not my story to tell, but it is connected to my life and how I turned out the way I am. And so we always talk about, oh, we're going to write a family memoir, but then we stop at like, but we can't share our secrets. And you kind of mentioned about, well, you can take out the parts that are private, but then I can't think, I'm a huge consumer of memoirs. I love reading
cool.
them.
Me too.
I'm always reading a memoir. I just finished one.
Awesome.
And I cannot think of one memoir I read that was good that didn't do that, i.e.
It didn't include the...
expose family members, expose their
Right.
secrets, and tell the private, intimate parts of their lives.
Yeah.
It won't be compelling. So do you have any advice around that?
I can share. I mean, I'm a student myself in the program, like I said, so I have not published it, but I can tell you what I've learned so far. So a few thoughts on that. One is that if you want it to, actually, let me do it the other way. If it doesn't have to be a memoir, then you can do because when you read it, like, it's really obvious this is real stuff. And you know, my wife is Afghan. I'm very familiar with the community, and I kind of know the things that go on. What he's describing is super real. So, but they're all fictional stories. So he's packaging it as fiction, but it's very clear that this is stuff that he knows like happens in real life. So that's one option. And initially for me, I actually just totally assumed that whatever writing I'm going to do is going to always be nonfiction, because I thought that's where the value is, telling true stories. But what I realized after reading, actually it wasn't, I was reading this for enjoyment, but I took a class on writing short stories, fictional short stories. And once I did it, what hit me was I can be so free to write almost anything, because it's just fiction. I just always say it's not real story. But of course, it's all based on something. I'm just changing the names and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of what's the right word? Flexibility or liberation, maybe you could say, in writing fiction. So that's one option. So I'm just putting that out there as an option. And some things are just too, like, there's just no way around it. There's no way to literally just say what actually happened, because like you said, even you could hurt somebody who's really close to you, and you know, this is not an option. So that's one thing. Second thing is, as far as memoirs, what my teachers consistently say is, write, W-R-I-T-E, write now, worry later. So what they're saying is first get it out. Like that's hard enough to do. So if you are a consumer of memoirs and you have an interest in doing it, my advice would be just write it first and then worry about like what do you have to take out or change and those kind of things. And that's a very common thing, by the way. People will put in the beginning of the memoirs, they'll just say like, you know, I changed some names to protect those people and I changed certain details to de-identify them basically. Sometimes even that's not going to help. Like if it's your parent, like everybody knows who your parents are, even if you change their names, right? So my current teacher, his name is Joshua Moore. He wrote a memoir called Model Citizen. And he was telling us about when he did it, that what he did was he wrote it and then he went to certain family members, for example, his wife. And he just said, so he broke people into different categories. He said some people, he doesn't really care what they think about it. He has no problem just exposing them and that's all there is to it. So he's not worried about it. There's some people he wants to at least alert them and let them know that he's about to publish this memoir and their name's going to be in it and just they should know that that's going to happen. So he does that. But then there's some people who have veto power, and he says that, like his wife, where he says, he just handed her the manuscript and says, anything you want me to take out, I will take out, no questions asked. And he just handed it to her, and that's what he did. And there was a few things that she wanted to take out, apparently. He did that, and then that was the end of the story. So, yeah, I don't know that there's any, like, magic solutions to this, but I think that's like you said, that's what makes it authentic, is like, of course, if it's just all like, hey, you know, rainbows and unicorns and stuff, like nobody's going to care. But it's the real gritty stuff that actually what makes it compelling and useful. But then, of course, but it could hurt somebody potentially. So I don't know if that's very helpful or not. Okay. Oh, interesting. Right. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it's tricky. But I hope you do it though. Like, I mean, I think it's exciting that I think people should do that. Of course, you have to do it in an ethical way. You're protecting people who are innocent and stuff. But okay, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, Law and Order is always ripped from the headlines, so they're literally going. Their writers are looking around at actual real newspaper articles around the country and then making them enough for TV.
Wow.
And fictionalizing it, and that's why they have that disclaimer at the beginning that any identity, if it's identical to any person or situation, is purely by coincidence.
Wow.
Kind of dovetailing on the question from the sister earlier, this is more about memoir ghiba, I guess. I was told by a sheikh that writing and publishing about my issue may be backbiting those who may have wronged me. How do I avoid this when I share my story?
So that's a question for a fiqh. So I won't attempt to answer it, but I think all I would say was, if that's a concern for the person, they should go to a scholar and I'm not saying to go shopping for a fatwa just to get what they want to, but I think what's important is to go to a scholar who actually understands what's happening and has a deep understanding of it, and then gets the fatwa. So I'll give you my example. So again, I'm not trying to attempt to get into the fiqh of this, but I'll just tell you what happened with me. When I was in the high control group and I got out, I was ironically one of the teachers from, this is a little complicated, but that group was very strict about who the members studied from. And so one of my teachers, who was not formally part of the group, but he was sort of, which I say sanctioned as one of their teachers, and he happened to be my teacher in that particular program. When I got out and I told him what was going on, and I was like, hey, I found out all this stuff, and you know, these guys are corrupt. And he's like, yeah, he already actually knew about some of it. And then I said to him that I'm going to expose these guys. So this wasn't like a memoir kind of thing. This was more like, I'm going to go public with this, and I'm going to make some public posts about what they did and how corrupt they are, because I don't want other people to suffer from it, as you know, go through what I went through. And here's the interesting thing. The people in the high control group always would frame it as ghiba and say, oh, you're backbiting, why are you throwing away your akhirah over this stuff, and you just should not talk about it, and those kind of things. So just all this kind of like bully tactics to keep me quiet. But I knew that wasn't right. Like, I just had this sense that that doesn't make sense. So when I asked a scholar who's like a proper scholar from actual Deoband, not just Deobandi, like connected to Deoband, he studied in the actual Deoband. He told me, no, not only do you need to say it, you should say it because you're trying to protect other people from their harm. And that rule about ghiba doesn't apply to them because they're going around harming other people. Now, it doesn't mean a blank check, like if you don't like the body odor or something like that, you just say everything you feel like. But stuff that's actually relevant to the community, that's not riba. So anyway, my recommendation to the person would be to go to a scholar they trust and make sure that they actually understand what the situation is, and then find out if it's really riba or not.
Thank you for that clarification. I think also somebody online was telling us what we were talking earlier about rapid eye movement for soldiers coming back with PTSD, and it's called EMDR is what they use to help those with PTSD.
That is fascinating.
EMDR.
I never heard of that. EMDR. Okay, I'll check that out as well.
Questions here? Brothers are awfully quiet.
Anything for the brother?
Yeah, brothers always, mashallah. They've figured it all out already, so that's why they don't have to ask.
Alhamdulillah. All right, I think should we wrap up? Anything else from anyone? Oh, sure, yeah. So this book is really, I haven't read it cover to cover, but it's called Opening Up by Writing It Down by Dr. James W. Pennebaker and Joshua M. Smith. And Pennebaker is the one who actually did the original study and made this very famous. He repeated the study. Many other people repeated the study. But then this book is relatively recent. So the studies are from the 80s and then throughout. But this particular book was published relatively recently. And so what it's really good because he doesn't just talk about this one application that we've been focused on. He goes into like other ways that writing can help you out. Like I said, I haven't read it cover to cover, but a lot of good practical information in here. And then this, I'm talking about this? Yeah. So this is the book is The Haunting of Haji Hotak and Other Stories by Jamil Jan Kochai. Again, local Muslim Afghan writer from Sacramento. That's the coincidence part of it. But he's, mashallah, like in the big leagues. He's about to go to Princeton to teach creative writing at Princeton. He's published in the New Yorker, very, very well regarded and just excellent. And just like I had an opportunity to meet him one time in Charlotte at a program in Sacramento. Very nice guy, very down to earth. No selling out, no compromising the kind of stuff at all, mashallah. And with maintaining all that, alhamdulillah, he's achieved a lot. So I highly recommend this book. And he has another book, 99 Nights in Logar, which is a place. His family's from Logar, I believe, in Afghanistan. So I recommend that as well.
I mean, taking it back to the Sunnah, there's always a precedence in Sunnah. And I remember this one time, Ustad Jose was saying in one of our lectures that Muhammad was kind of in a council meeting in Medina. And he was sitting there, and then this lady comes in, very unnerved, wants to talk with the Prophet. And he can see the trauma, the hurt that's in her face. And he said to her, I can't talk right now, but you tell me any street in Medina, and what day and what time, and I'll be there.
Wow.
And he met her. And he just listened. He didn't say anything. He just listened to her. Wow. And she was complaining about her husband and her parents and all this stuff. Just 2 hours, just listened to her. And that shows the cathartic nature of allowing this all to come out. That sometimes we need. And the famous story is the pet bird, the little boy who had the nightingale, the little bird. And Muhammad noticed something was wrong with him. And then he goes in there and he says, he says in a very poetic way, what did you like to do with the gulgul, the bird? And he says it, and then the boy would say he'd wake me up in the morning and he'd get up my arm and go up there because I think he was a little responsible for the death of that bird, and so he just let him get it all out. Like, what did you like to do with the bird? Not what did you do to the bird? What did you like to do with the bird? And letting him just get it out. So there's a precedence here, I think, in our Sunnah.
I didn't know that. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, no, that's actually the essence of this. Like I was saying earlier, is it's really just all about there's something that's bugging you, you're hiding, you're acting, and I didn't make a big deal about this, but that's what he keeps bringing up is that it takes active work for you to hide that thing, whatever that trauma is, that bad memory is. You're doing that active work, and so by releasing it through expressive writing, you now don't have to do that anymore. You're done. You've already gotten rid of it. And so I think this is very much related. Is that these folks just kind of spoke to the Prophet ﷺ about whatever it was that was bothering them.
Gabbar Mate, what is this book? The Body Keeps Count. The body.
Oh, the Body Keeps Score. I was actually
yeah.
just had it. Yeah.
There you go. Oh, that's not him. Who is that? Oh. Right.
You read that book? I actually have it, but I haven't read it. It's good, right? What's this? Do you mind just sharing like sort of a summary of what the main point is?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what you were saying, which is that we can't just brush things off, that at the end of the day, the trauma that we hold in will be released in physical manifestations, whether that's autoimmune disease or cancer or heart attacks. In some way, your body will keep the score, and it always does. And so for that reason, it's very important to resolve our trauma and unpack it and heal from it.
Perfect.
That's the gist.
Yeah. MashaAllah. Yeah, thank you.
But, Gabor Mate writes a lot of really good books as well. Yeah.
Oh, MashaAllah. Who is that?
Gabor Mate, he's a Canadian physician, I think. Maybe his parents were Holocaust survivors, and he had a very traumatic upbringing with the trauma that they came with via the Holocaust, and so now he's helping families that are individuals that have gone through familial trauma, I believe. Yeah. He's very pro-Palestine, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
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 Oh, amazing. Okay, I didn't know. Thank you.
Gabor Mate. If you want to end with the dua, inshallah?
Yeah.
Van der Kook is the author of the, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bessel van der Kook is the author of Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, we'll wrap up. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.